It's time for the Sojourn in Faith podcast. Chris Vaughn will be your guide through exciting discussions of the Bible, faith, and all things Christian. We pray that the discussions and lessons here will provide you with clarity and encouragement for your walk with God, and that we will all grow in faith together. May God strengthen you for the journey as you sojourn in faith.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Sojourn in Faith. Happy New Year, happy 2026 to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me for this first episode. This is our first Sojourn in Faith episode for 2026, and I'm excited. You can see me now. This is pretty cool. It's awesome that we're going to have some video. I'm excited about all the different things that we're going to be doing in 2026, and I'm excited about the ways that God is going to use this show in 2026. I'm excited about your growth. I pray for your growth, that you will know Him more and more, and that you go through 2026 experiencing God in new and powerful ways, because I believe that's the key to everything. Closeness with God is the answer to all of life's problems and all of life's uncertainties. All of the future holds in God's hands. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about this new year. I won't lie to you though, I'm usually a little conflicted when it comes to the new year. I go through kind of these dual positions. On the one hand, I am very type A. I am a planner. I am an organizer. I love looking back at what was before and kind of reviewing where we've come from, reviewing what I've done, looking back at what I did really good at and looking back at what not so good. Maybe I need to work on it. I love looking ahead. I love dreaming. I love looking for goals and seeing what is next. Who do I want to be tomorrow and how do I get there? So in that vein, I love New Year's. I love the whole connotation of the New Year's idea. I'm not as big of a fan of the way we often in our culture do resolutions, but I love the New Year and I love starting that off that way. On the other hand, I think about seasons, and my wife Jordana and I have talked a lot about this in probably the last 2 years. Really this weird idea that in the middle of winter, in the middle of the darkest season of the year, at least for us over here in the West, in America, and it's like, that's when we're going to try to have new energy and inject life into our rhythms and patterns and stuff. And it's just weird because winter is traditionally a time of rest. It is a time of recovery and recuperation. It is a time to slow down and pause. It's not necessarily a time to be like, all right, I'm going to hit my goals, here we go, right? There's a level of waiting that happens in the winter, right? You know, you think back even, 100 years ago, probably less than that, but back 100 years ago, winter was you literally can't do anything. Your goal in the spring and the summer and trying to wrap it up in the fall is to get ready to go near hibernation level, right? You got to have your food stores, you got to have all the repairs on the house done, you got to have everything done, because in the winter, you're not going to be able to get a lot of work done. You're not going to be able to produce as much food and all of those kinds of things. And so it is kind of weird to me how we pick that time and that season to do stuff. Perhaps timing is not our strong suit. It reminds me of Ecclesiastes chapter 3 in verse 1, where Solomon writes, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." And so I struggle with both these ideas, and I wonder if at least to some degree that's why people kind of fall out on the resolutions, or why they kind of like fall apart, a month or so down the line. Apart from just bad goal setting. Some of it really just is bad goal setting. You set a goal too vague, or you shoot too high, or whatever. You insert the blank here. There's all kinds of reasons why goals fail. But I do wonder if that's at least one component of it, is that we are actively trying to go against the God-ordered nature. Like winter is a time for rest, and we're trying to go, and we're trying to be, and we're trying to do all these new things. So here's what I have kind of found myself doing, and I wanted to share it with you as we're into the new year now, and maybe you've made some resolutions and you're doing really good so far, but you're starting to feel it peter out. Maybe you're still going strong. Hey, more power to you. Keep going. But what I want to try to do, and what I've been trying to do the last couple of years, is kind of try to find a balance between the season of life that we're often in, weather-wise and like just time-wise, and where we are, and also my love for looking ahead and looking back and planning and looking for the future. And so I don't go crazy with it, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't go crazy trying to say, all right, today, hardline, here's my time. Instead, I kind of do a gradual approach where I'm going to look at it and I'm going to reflect in it in a season of rest, and I'm going to start making changes, gradual changes that are going to help me. And there's a beauty in that anyway. I think sometimes half of our problem too is that we bite off more than we can chew or more than we can handle in a given sitting at a given time. And that causes us to stumble, and that causes us to mess up and to fall short of our goals, or to burn out and just abandon it altogether until the next new year rolls around. And so gradual progression is really good. And I wanted to get on here and share with you another idea that has really been beneficial to me to learn and to try to apply into my life. And it takes the focus away from what I'm going to do, and it tries to take the focus and who do I want to be. Instead of having a goal that I'm going to arbitrarily try to hit, and maybe even giving some micro goals that are going to help me be there, right? Oh, I want to get in better shape, so I'm going to work out 3 times a week, right? Yeah, I have my get in better shape. My micro goal to help me get there is work out 3 times a week. But bigger than that, who are we going to be? This lifestyle changes. So there's something that helps resolve some of that conflict for me, and that's called the rule of life. I've noticed the rule of life, maybe if you're in Christian circles or Christianese circles, whatever you want to say there, it's gained some traction recently, in recent years. The idea of the rule of life, the idea of that terminology has gained quite a bit of traction, but some may be still unfamiliar with it, so I want to kind of define it for us. A rule of life is a gradual, gracious framework for intentional living. You see, it's a set of spiritual rhythms and practices that help you abide in God. It's not a list of rigid rules that we're going to follow. Instead, it is a framework or pattern for living. And while the focus is specifically on abiding in God, it doesn't have to just be abiding in God. It can also have to do a lot with any other area you apply it to. Who are you going to be? And what are the practices that are going to get you there? This is the second time I've thought of this story in line to this kind of a thing. So I feel bad because it's the second time I've used this analogy, and I hate double using it, especially when it's a movie. I think about the Batman movie at the very end of the Batman trilogy with Christian Bale, where he's going off and he's going to take the bomb off into the distance. And he points out that it's not who I am, but it's what I do that defines me. And that's really important, because what we do is what defines us. It's who we are. And so what the rule of life is trying to do is, instead of trying to set a goal somewhere off in the distance, it's trying to say, here are the behavior traits that we are going to try to embody. So the rule of life shows up in monastic Christian life. I believe it's like the 1400s. I may be wrong, but I think it's the 1400s, specifically with Saint Benedict. And they had the monasteries, and they would come up with this rule of life. Saint Benedict is the first. You can look up the rule of life of Saint Benedict on Google, and you're going to get the whole thing. I had to do some graduate work on it a while back, and we basically, it's long. He has a pretty big rule of life, and his is pretty detailed and pretty structured, in which the monks are supposed to live a certain way. And so that's where it comes from. But it's been used a lot more. Like I said, it's gaining some traction. It's been used by church leaders, families, and just the everyday people who want to shape their life and live in a similar way to Jesus, to follow his way. It helps us to lay hold of some biblical promises too. You know, when you think about the transformation that's supposed to happen, Romans 12:2, it reads, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And there's two parts that are active, and then the bulk of the work in that passage is God active, right? So first job for us is to say no to the way the world is doing things. No to the things the world values, because we found something more valuable, really. But our first job is not to conform to the world. And instead, we're supposed to put ourselves in a position to be transformed. And I love in there that Paul doesn't say, instead transform your mind. Instead, go and renew your mind. He says, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. In essence, what he's saying is allow yourself to be changed by abiding in Jesus, by connecting with God, by being with him and prioritizing that relationship with him first. When you do that, then you're abiding in him, and you will start to see life the way you want it to be will take shape. All right? It's important to know that it's not a worldly definition of life. And I've said this on the podcast before. It's not a worldly definition of life that we're looking for. And I think that's one of the key pieces to Christianity that we have to understand first, is that when we say yes to Jesus, we're saying yes to a different definition of what real life actually is. We're saying yes to real peace. We're saying yes to real joy, which means the things that we used to think would give us peace, joy, value, we no longer accept. And so we stop chasing those things and we start chasing him. So that's why sometimes, you'll have the prosperity gospel will come in and it'll play on those things and say, oh, well, yes, Jesus is going to give you the life you want. But what they forget to do is change from the worldly definition of what life is about and change over to the spiritual definition, Jesus' definition of what real abundant life actually is. And between you and me, God's way is better. The life that is promised to us in God, not just because of eternity, but because of what it does for me today, as the Spirit molds me and changes me and gives me peace and connects me with him and allows me to have better relationships with those around me. Man, I'm telling you, it's a better life. It's a better way forward. And so a rule of life, having a framework or a structure for us to live off of, helps us to do that. It helps us to reject the patterns of the world and to conform our lives instead of to the world, to his way, and so to let him reign in every area of our life. So let's kind of flesh it out a little bit more. Let's get a little more detail and a little more thoughts into what a rule of life is and what it isn't. I've heard it described as a trellis. So a trellis is something you put in gardening. For those of you that don't know gardening, I'm only a newbie. I barely know gardening, barely. Doesn't mean I keep anything alive. It just means I halfway pretend like I know a couple terms. But a trellis is something that you put in the ground, and it looks kind of like a grid, and it goes up. It can be a grid. Sometimes they're in little diamond shapes, right? You've got the diamond shape running up. And other times it's just a straight grid. You even can have a trellis sometimes where it's just, two stakes and a wire, and you're roping the plant up. But what it does is it gives plants a support structure to grow upon. In a trellis, you would use that kind of thing for a vine type plant, right? It's a support structure that enables the vine to grow up and grow into and weave in and out of the framework. It gives it something to hold on to and a direction to go. Pair that with John 15, which we've talked about on here before, that Jesus says that we are the branches and that He is the vine, and that our goal then is to abide in Him. Without Him, we can't do anything. And so a rule of life is a framework for us to be able to let Him abide in us more. It's personal, it's realistic, and it's season specific. I like the term rhythm for rules of life, that it is a rhythm. The rhythm can change. See, I think that's sometimes another one of our problems when it comes to just about every area of our lives. We really, really, really want, that set it and forget it. It always makes me think of the cooking shows or whatever, where, the Instapot. You can go and put it all in the Instapot and you set it and then forget it until it's time to eat and you're done, right? We want that for every area. You do, don't lie. In almost every area of our life. I'm guilty of that too, where I want to be able to just hash it out, flesh it out, get it done, check. All right, now I can move on to something else. But nothing in life works that way. Nothing in life works that way. There will always need to be adjustments. There will always need to be things that change in order to accommodate the season of life that you're in. For example, winter. It's the darkest time of the year. The days are shorter than they will be all year, just from a calendar cycle, like from where we are in our orbit around the sun. And so in that season, maybe it's not good to be gung-ho, I'm going to conquer the world in, less daylight hours than ever before, right? For sometimes there are financial seasons, right? You may go into a period where, the finances are tighter than they've ever been. And I've got to change some things about how I'm living and the life I'm choosing, who I am and what I'm able to do has to change. For some of us, health is a concern at times. Sometimes our health causes us to go into a different season. Our kids cause us to go into a different season. It's always fun to notice the transitions that our kids make. When, Jaden went from, my oldest, he went from being, kind of the young kid to the preteen. Now he's full teen. And it's kind of cool to watch him because he's starting to get into that. I'm dabbling with getting ready to be a man and do my own thing. I'm able to handle a little more freedoms. I can have some more responsibility. I'm not going to just swing and miss and ground out of that one. But and then we've got Carson in my middle coming right behind, and he's kind of in that, now I was a kid and now I'm kind of growing into the preteen, getting ready to go into teen. And it's interesting to notice the literal real changes that happen in their psychology and in their physiology as they're going through all those changes and helping them navigate those changes, right? Our rule of life and who we are and who we're going to be changes with our kids some also, because we have to be the parents to guide and cater to how their season is and help them navigate those things as well. I may not be able to do all the things I want to do because my kids need me, right? I might be in that season where that's okay, and that is fine. There is nothing wrong with that. I think we need to be aware of the seasons, and so that's one of the things that is really nice about a rule of life approach as opposed to just a hard and fast goal approach, is that I'm allowed to tweak the rule of life to fit my seasons without just blowing the whole thing up and saying, nope, I'm not going to hit it. Maybe next year I'll hit it, and it's okay. This one's a big one. The focus of a rule of life is about formation, not performance. Not performance. And that's so big, right? Because we are performance-based. Most of our resolutions, if we're honest, are based on us performing. Being able to say at the end of it, check, done. I got it, right? I achieved or I didn't achieve, right? Versus a rule of life is about forming you into that person. You may have reached your goal weight, or you may not have. But at the end, you're going to be someone who's more disciplined and focused on fitness. You may be as close to God as you want to be at the end of the year, at the end of whatever that season is, or you may not be, but you will be more disciplined and more focused. You will guard and protect your Bible time. You will have those kinds of things, right? It's about forming who you are, not performing to some standard. And that's really, really big because that's freeing. That is a freeing thing to be able to be like, you know what? I just got to consistently show up, right? How many times, I've heard it a lot, so I know I can't be the only one that hears all these guys are like, you know, the name of the game in success in business or success in health is just consistency. It's just showing up, right? That was my internet influencer voice. I apologize that you had to hear that. Not once in here does
that's
God
always
ever
the
say,
thing. Consistency is the name of the game,
and yet
over
in
and
our
over
goal
and
setting,
over
in our
again,
traditional
he says, just be
rules and
faithful.
resolutions and
Just
things,
keep
it's
walking.
still all about
Just
achievement,
keep
not about
trying.
consistently showing
Just
up.
keep striving.
A rule of
Just
life frees me
come to
from
me.
the goal and just allows
You can
me
find it. You can
to
go,
work
if you can
on
find another
becoming.
story in there that
It
God
doesn't
says,
say,
hey,
be
deadline
successful,
to that.
you go for it.
It's interesting.
My favorite is in
God is that
Joshua,
way.
right? When
God does that.
Moses
All
is giving
throughout
his
Scripture.
farewell address. The
All
message
throughout
was,
Scripture.
be strong and courageous because God is with you. And that becomes Joshua's mantra. You can go back and listen to some of the episodes we did last year about Joshua. That became his mantra, right? Be strong and courageous, for the Lord is with you. Not go and succeed in all of your conquest. If you will just be strong and courageous and be, then God will take care of the doing, right? Do we believe that though? That if I just show up and stay consistent to becoming who I want to be and who God has called me to be, that He will take care of the rest. That's what Romans 12 is telling us. That's what a lot of the scriptures point to. It's not about works in that sense. It's not about works to earn. It's about works to connect you to Him and let Him do through you. And so that's an important thing to think about. It's a tool for stability and for freedom, and it encourages faithfulness to God. And again, it all fits in that structure. Let's talk about a couple things that it's not. Let's take a look. It's not, as we said, that legalist checkbox. It's not so you can sit there and say, you know what, I did this, didn't do that, right? It's not something that we should be beating ourselves up if we don't hit. It's something we strive for every day, right? When I build a rule of life for whatever area of my life I've got one going for, it's not about did I do it or did I not. It's about did I become closer to that person than I was yesterday. And then striving to meet God in the growth. That's what it's about. It's not a productivity system in that way. It's not about trying to fit more things to do in less amount of time. It's not about being super efficient. It's not about having something fixed forever. It's not about having a hard, fast rule that this is just what it is forever. It should evolve with you. It should grow with you. As we talked about, same thing for seasons. It has to flex. So it has to flex with who God changes you to be. Because if we're doing the abiding right, then I promise from personal experience and from what the Bible tells me, God will change you. God will do it. And you won't be the same person. And so your rule of life will have to grow with you as God grows you. And that's really important. So I want to talk about a couple other things with the rule of life and that idea. The concept is kind of clear biblically. The terminology is what's different. I love in Daniel, for example, Daniel chapter 6, that Daniel prays at fixed times. You could read that in Daniel 6, verse 10. That there were fixed times, that this is who I am and this is what I do, right? Even when there was a law written against praying, Daniel did exactly what he was going to do to begin with. He did exactly what his rule of life, if you will, would have mandated him to. He went to pray faithfully to God. Jesus follows this pattern. He withdrew regularly all the time to pray. And we see that rhythm shared in devotion in Acts too, with the church and being together. You can read about that towards the end of Acts, that they developed a rhythm and a pattern for being together and eating together and fellowshipping with one another and devoting themselves to the things of God. Psalm 1 reflects that order, that intentional life of striving to be with God and to dwell with Him and become something. So you can have a rule of life for just about anything. You can have a rule of life for your work. This is who I am going to be when I'm at the office. And you have to prayerfully seek God out in that. Who do you want me to be? Beyond just the minimum, this is my job. Who do you want me to be here at work? We can have that for our health. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I'm going to be the kind of person that eats better, eats correctly, whatever. I'm going to be the kind of person who is physically active 5 days a week, 1 day a week. I will tell you, the more consistent, from personal experience, the more consistent you can be and the less pauses you have in your rule, the better off it'll go. And that's just my personal experience for you there. Some spiritual spots that you can have it for. You can have it in your prayer, in your scripture. You can have a daily rhythm of scripture and prayer time. For me, it's usually in the evenings or the mornings is when I'm good at getting alone, getting in the Word, and being there. One of my goals is to increase that in the morning. One of my rule of life ideas is to be able to do that for a specific amount of time every morning. Not to do this study type of thing for podcast or for preaching or anything like that, but just as a me sit with it time. You can do scripture reading plans that are like Lectio Divina. I think we've talked about that on here before, but it basically incorporates prayer and scripture all in one with some silence and solitude to be able to connect with God. You can put it under your rest and your Sabbath. You should have some sort of weekly practice of Sabbath. I would encourage that all day long and just find something. In my experience, it's really hard because, Christianity, in its goal of being similar but different, kind of the completion of Judaism, took the Sabbath that was on Saturday and put it to Sunday. And yet, for many of us, and for me for a long time, Sunday was like the busiest day of the week. What do you mean I'm supposed to rest on Sunday? That doesn't work all the time. But find times that can rest. And it's important that we demystify Sabbath a little bit. Sabbath doesn't mean you sit on your bed or sit on your couch with a book all day, right? That doesn't equal Sabbath for some people. Sabbath is what fills your spirit, what gives you rest. It's a time to focus on family. It's a time to focus on things that make you feel rejuvenated. And yes, God and prayer and reading His Word specifically should be a part of that. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you're locked into for whatever period is. If you can do a day, then great. A Sabbath period or a sabbatical or whatever the case may be, right? I read in a book that he talked about, for him, Sabbath was going out and mowing the grass. That was the time that he felt rejuvenated and he felt built up and encouraged. And so that's what he did. He went and he would go and mow the grass, and he was uninterrupted while he did it, and it was great. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm on board with that. I'm odd like that. I like cutting the grass. I like the silence therein. Sometimes I'll kind of have some music, but sometimes it's just the loud hum of the engine and we're going. Of course, we got an electric one now, so it's really quiet. All right, that's a tangent. Let's move on. I don't want to do that. Anyways, you should have those kinds of things. And then there's not always the Sabbath rest as a whole day. There can be times where it's like, you know what, at lunch, I'm going to eat my lunch and then I'm going to take 15 minutes and I'm just going to sit. I'm not going to listen to anyone or anything. I'm just going to sit. And whenever my mind starts to wander, I'm just going to bring it back to still and just take a breather. And I think that's important. So along with that too, you've also got sleep boundaries. I have to fully disclose that I am terrible with these. I am a night person. I want to be up all night. And I am really bad at holding a sleep boundary and making sure that I get the required amount of sleep, or vice versa, that I start the day off in the right way sometimes because, I didn't hold a sleep boundary the night before. So there's those kinds of things that you can worry about and kind of put in your rule of life, saying, I'm going to make sure I get 8 hours of sleep. And that means whatever time you go to bed, I'm going to be up 8 hours later. Or if I've got to be up at a certain time for work, that means I've got to go to bed at this time. And you've got to hold that boundary, and that can be hard because there can be all kinds of things vying for your time. For me, oftentimes, that's the period of peace. That's when our house is fairly calm. And so, of course, I don't want to go to bed. I'm enjoying the calm and being able to focus on whatever it is I want to focus on. And so it makes it a little bit challenging. Technology limits. This is a huge one, and it's growing bigger and bigger for our culture. Have periods where you say, enough is enough of having the computer in my hand. I do not need this in my hand. I don't need to be scrolling. I don't need to be looking. I don't need to even be reading on here. I will always and forever be a fan of paper books for that purpose. I'm not saying I don't use digital books and that I don't use a lot of digital resources, but I'm going to tell you I will forever be a paper fan because there are sometimes you've just got to put the screens down. You've just got to put them away, and you got to do that. So those are areas that you could incorporate into your rule of life if you want to. We talked about work, beginning and ending correctly. In our relationships, you can find rules of life for maybe being more hospitable, maybe having more of those kinds of relationships. Accountability is another one where you have maybe a friend or a family member that you can go to and say, you know what, we are going to hold each other accountable to being who we want to be. In loving ways, we're going to build up each other and encourage each other. That's another way you can include that, incorporate that into your rule of life for who you are. Church participation. Make a resolve to be in church. I wrote in a post not that long ago that perfect attendance isn't going to get you to heaven, but it sure doesn't hurt, right? And that's what church really, when you think about church, it's a reality of that the more you can get, the better off you are. The more you can be around people who are trying to go the same direction as you, the more you can saturate yourself with the Word and those kinds of things, the better off you are. So church participation is a big one. Service in church participation is a big one for me. I will tell you that nothing has ever grown me more, I think, personal reflection, than serving in church in different capacities and in different ways at different times. Of course, you've got your body and stewardship ideas. Anything from being the kind of person who works out, having exercise as part of your rule of life. I'm just someone who exercises. I'm not worried about the end result. I'm just worried about being the person who does that, who takes my body seriously and takes health seriously. Fasting is another one. If you're able to fast, I encourage you to fast because, we are at war with the flesh. And one of the ways that you are at war with the flesh is indeed fasting. It's with food. Sometimes you could say that fasting would go with your screens and you could pair the two together if you want to. But I would encourage you to food fast if you can. Maybe it's just kick the sodas. I'm a person who doesn't drink soda. I'm a person who doesn't eat desserts. I'm the person who, I will not go back for second helpings, no matter how good it is, whatever that happens to be. Maybe in your rule of life, you can incorporate simplicity in your finances. I am the kind of person who is content with what I have. I'm the kind of person who gives generously and shares. Right? And here's some ways that I can do that. The goal of the rule of life then also is to revisit it so you remind yourself who you are day in and day out. It doesn't do any good if you build this rule of life and then you never look at it again, right? You've got to keep pulling it back out and rereading, this is who I am. This is what I do, right? And that's really, really important. And then, of course, we've got in your missions and witness and who you are, then maybe it's just a resolve to have evangelism in your life to where, I'm actively trying to start Jesus conversations with people. If you don't feel confident with those kinds of things, that's where it is. I need to be the kind of person who is confident in that. And so you incorporate that in your rule of life as well. There's any number of things you can do. There's tons of subcategories in all of this. Family is another one. I want to be the kind of father that my kids can go to and have open conversations with. I want to be the kind of husband whose wife treasures and adores him and feels safe with. Whatever it happens to be, fix those things of who you are and think about those categories. There's, like I said, an endless list of subcategories. And you can be specific about it. Be specific, but make it not about achieving something. Make it about being something. And then reminding yourself to be there. And I would encourage you to do that with prayer as well. Prayerfully think about those things. Don't just, hey, this sounds good, this sounds good. Think about those things in partnership with God. God, who do you want me to be by the end of 2026? And that's powerful. And I hope it'll be a blessing to you to be able to do that. Well, that's all for this time. We'll see you next week on Sojourn in Faith. God bless.
Thanks for listening. If this episode was a blessing to you, please make sure to subscribe and take a moment to rate the show on the platform of your choice. Want more content and encouragement? Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at Sojourn in Faith. See you next week.